fun fact to start the presentation with, I thought I used ChatGPT as a student. I got hired in November 2022. ChatGPT released on November 30th, 2022. So I didn't use it as a student, but I did use it very heavily as a junior developer. So very closely related. But I really thought I did use it as a student, but my memory is not very good. All right, so first, let's start with a disclaimer. I have not been coerced to say anything positive about ChatGPT. ChatGPT did not force me to say nice things. So who am I? Software developer at Net Benefit. I was a Get Coding student from February 2022 to October 2022. I did continue into November a little bit. That's when I got hired, so I kind of slacked off and then didn't finish the program. So I didn't actually finish Get Coding from through all the modules. But I am by no means an AI expert. There's probably people on this call, there's definitely people on this call that are more knowledgeable on the topic than I am. I just really like using ChatGPT. I haven't done anything with the APIs or anything like that. I do want to, but I haven't. I use it for a lot of stuff in my day-to-day. Just general questions, looking up recipes, board game rules. There's a custom GPT specifically for it. Just creating fun images with DALL-E, and of course I use it for coding. So yes, that's me, a lover of board games, coffee connoisseur, and a friend of AI. Prior to ChatGPT, I used the standard approach to learning software development, looking at documentation, Googling things, Stack Overflow, all the standard stuff. So I mostly learned the basics, the fundamentals without it. This is the proven and effective method. It worked. I got hired. ChatGPT released in November 30th, 2022. I basically started using it right away. And I used it heavily as a junior developer. I was still learning. So it's very similar to learning as a student, a little bit different because I had learned some of the fundamentals already. What changed for me when I started using it? Basically, my learning rate accelerates. I set a pretty rapid pace for myself anyway when I was in Get Coding. I was a correctional officer before I did Get Coding or during Get Coding, and I really didn't want to do that anymore. So I went at a pretty rapid pace. ChatGPT allowed me to keep up that pace and accelerate it even more as a junior developer. How did it do that? Well, basically, I suddenly had access to a private tutor all the time. And I had to get pretty good at describing my problem without just pasting in source code. My prompting got better over time. It is a skill. ChatGPT can be very lazy for anyone that has used it. It can be hard to get it to give you what you want it to give you, but it can be done with work, and you do get better at prompting over time. So having access to the private tutor, it allowed me to ask specific questions with specific context to what I was currently working on. On top of that, I could ask very specific follow-up questions and provide it with relevant examples, or have it provide me with relevant examples. But beyond that, I didn't just take the answers and move on. I wanted to know the why, and I found ChatGPT was perfect for digging into digging deeper into a concept. Many times in the early, and still using ChatGPT now, I've basically gone down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out why something works the way it does, or why one thing is better than another thing. Sometimes I probably spent more time than I really needed to on that stuff, but I really found it useful for developing my baseline knowledge. Not only did I have access to a private tutor, and this one's kind of related, but basically I now had all my documentation in one place. I mean, to use a very basic example, I used MUI in my main Get Coding project. We use it at work as well. Say I want to implement a button with MUI. I can, instead of going to the documentation and looking for how do you implement a button in MUI, I can just ask ChatGPT, how do I implement a button in MUI? On top of that, you can ask follow-up questions. Like, what if it gives me code for a button that's solid and I want the button to be outlined? I can ask it, well, what if I want the button to be outlined? And I don't have to go looking for that part in the documentation. And then what if I want the button to be bigger? What if I want an icon on the button? It saves a lot of time of searching through documentation, and you spend less time looking up documentation and more time learning. Other thing I found really useful when I first started using ChatGPT was ciphering errors quickly. I found giving it error codes really helpful in my debugging process. It narrowed down the scope for me. I no longer had to go looking for a close example on Stack Overflow. I could give it the exact error code that I got in my console, or the one that VS Code shows in the when you hover over the red line. I can't speak today. Couldn't sleep while my daughter is sick. So now I had all this. Everything is perfect, right? Not always. It's very easy to use ChatGPT as a crutch. Anyone that I've talked to about this before has probably heard me say, don't use this tool as a crutch. It's very tempting to use it because it's quick, it's somewhat accurate, and it's productive. And honestly, it's a little bit addicting. You feel productive when you're doing it. Things are happening quickly, things are working until they don't. But that's the problem. Do you know what you just wrote? Does it even work? Can you effectively modify it later? If you don't understand the concepts of what you're doing with it, you're not going to recognize the many errors that ChatGPT will throw your way. You likely won't be able to maintain your code down the road if you don't know what you wrote in the first place. So, I mean, one key concept to take away right away is just always ensure you understand everything it's giving you. And this isn't to say go ask it to give you code all the time, because I'm not saying that either. But if it is giving you code, make sure you understand it. Don't just take it and use it. This can feel like slow learning at times, but it's not, because you're actually learning as opposed to just using what it gives you. One other downfall using ChatGPT is it can stifle your developing your own problem solving skills. If you're not actively trying to solve problems, you're not learning how to solve problems. Problem solving is a skill that does need to be nurtured. So again, don't use it as a crutch. Sometimes it deciphers errors too quickly. I mean, debugging is a major part of software development. You need to learn how to debug your own code. You need to know how to debug other people's code. If you let it solve every little error for you, you won't learn those crucial skills. And then, of course, there's the hallucinations. They are very real. You need to be able to recognize them. They're real, and that's fine. But you need to understand the concepts so you can recognize them. This comes back to understanding what you're working with, knowing the fundamentals, knowing the basics. Like when ChatGPT gives me code now, I can often recognize that it's not going to work if it's not going to work. And then you have access to the follow-up questions and say, well, no, this isn't how this works. And you can continue in the context window. But if you can't recognize it in the first place and you just take it and you put in your code, then something doesn't work. You don't know what doesn't work, and you're just wasting time. That one. I did, just as a fun little experiment, I wanted to force ChatGPT to hallucinate, and it really wasn't that hard. So this is just the very quick conversation I had with ChatGPT. Gave it 4 numbers and asked it to identify the pattern and the next 2 numbers in the sequence. These are just 4 random numbers. I did not have a pattern. I just gave it 4 numbers. Comes back with an answer. First, it tries to just get the differences and recognizes that there's no pattern there. But then it kind of goes off the rails a little bit, takes the absolute value, gets 528, 2,141, 1,119, and then from this deduces that the absolute values are increasing, which they are not. Then it continues to get the pattern, and for some reason decides to add the differences. That's the pattern. So that it tells me the next two numbers in the sequence are 8,610, which is already one of the numbers in the sequence, and 10,751. I asked it, how confident are you? Oops. How confident are you in this answer? It says he's moderately confident because the absolute values are increasing. So again, this is a very straightforward thing, and everyone can look at this and see that it's not true, but this happens with code as well. And if it's a concept that you aren't familiar with, that isn't as obvious, you're not learning. You're making your learning harder. So I came up with some tips. A lot of these are really related, but these are some things that I think about when I'm using it and I've thought about as I've used it, as I've developed as a developer. First one is, as I said before, use it as a tutor. Ensure it's really good at taking roles. If you give ChatGPT a role, it does a pretty good job with that. Like if you tell it to act as a senior software expert or engineer or five-star professional chef or whatever, it does a pretty good job of taking roles. You can get, I don't remember if you can give it custom instructions in the free tier or not. You can in the paid tier, and it's very useful. I give it like the full context of my code stack, everything we use. I tell it to act as an expert software engineer, tell it to leave out filler, address me as Sir Andrew. That's really useful. If you can't do that in the free version, you can still do it at the beginning of every chat. You write the same stuff at the beginning of every chat, just less convenient to have to write it all the time. But it does do a really good job of taking roles. You can use it to brainstorm solutions, but write them yourselves. Like, it goes back to the crutch issue, I guess. Like, don't make it do all the work, but like, don't hesitate to brainstorm solutions and then work on those solutions. It should supplement your knowledge, not replace it. As I've said before, and I'll say it again, ensure you understand what it tells you. It's great for searching documentation, but it should supplement your knowledge. Being able to ask follow-up questions while staying in context is extremely useful, something that Stack Overflow and Google doesn't give you. If it tells you something that you don't fully understand, you can ask why, or why did you do this? It's just really useful for that. Again, understand every line. So try writing similar code to ensure you understand it. So if you get a solution from ChatGPT, you think you understand it, try writing something similar without using ChatGPT to see if you actually understand it. If you get stuck, it's okay to ask for pointers to really hammer home the knowledge. Ask for guidance, not answers. Giving a context to your problem. Treat it like the tutor it can be. Give it the role. Don't straight up ask for answers. Get on track when you're stuck. But always foster your own problem-solving skills. When your code works, prompt it for different approaches. And always keep in mind that whatever you give it can be used to train the model. I don't care if OpenAI has my code, personal code. It's important to keep in mind if you're working on work software. Now we at work, we have the ChatGPT team account and they don't train on that data, which is really nice. Ask it to code review your code and ask for different solutions. See what other stuff comes out. This was really big for me when I first started using it. And even now, when I get something working, like I'll have my code reviewed, I'll look at different approaches. I literally just do this for fun, just to see what different approaches are out there and then try to understand those approaches. And you can ask questions about like which of these two is more efficient and that kind of stuff. I really like it. I just do it for fun. It improves your communication skills as well. Prompting is hard, gets easier over time, gets easier with practice, but overcoming ChatGPT's laziness sometimes is a trial, but it does improve your ability to describe technical issues, which is a really important skill. And use it to generate practice moments. It's almost like creating your own test, creating your own technical interview. It's really, really nice for that. Helps build those basic foundational learning models and that kind of stuff. And you can always follow up all this knowledge with like other like reliable sources like Mozilla Development Network, like that kind of stuff. There's lots of good sources out there if you want to ensure what you're learning is correct. none of this matters if the prompts aren't good, like I talked about. This takes practice. Like I said before, ChatGPT is lazy, but you can force it to work most of the time. Tools like ChatGPT are not going anywhere. Learning to use them effectively is important. However, to get a job, you will need to complete a technical interview, and you won't have ChatGPT. If you're serious about your career journey, it's okay to learn the tool, but use it properly. Don't stifle your growth. Technical interviews can be hard, but they can be impossible if you haven't actually learned anything. I use ChatGPT in my day-to-day at work now. I've been a software developer for a bit over a year, approaching a year and a half. I still use it every single day. It's a huge time saver for me on documentation. A good example of this recently, our platform at NetBenefit, we allow clients or users to upload data a lot, and it's always been a pain because they need to match data types and all that kind of stuff, and they got to match values in our system, and there's always been issues with it. I recently built a feature that basically generates dynamic templates using Excel.js. So all of the fields on the Excel sheet now have drop-down menus with the actual client-specific data. If they have a feature turned off, it won't show up on their template. It's very nice. I built that with Excel.js, which I had never used before. I'm confident in my ability that I could have still done it without ChatGPT, but it would have taken me a lot longer. I had the I didn't have to go searching through the documentation. I could just ask, how do you do this specific thing in Excel.js? And TypeScript, it was big for TypeScript for that, because I didn't know the different types that Excel.js has in their code. I was actually able to just give it the Excel.js type file, and it had access to all the types, and it could type everything properly for me. It was extremely useful. Anytime I would hit an error, I could, like I said before, I could give it the exact error code, tell it I'm using Excel.js, and it just really, really got me on track. It was such a time saver. I built that feature in a week or two. Without ChatGPT, it would have taken much longer. Also, I've already touched on this a little bit, but it's a huge time saver for TypeScript. We use TypeScript at work. Like I said, for Excel.js, I was literally able to give it the type file, and it was able to help me properly type my code. And it's generally pretty good overall at typing for libraries that you're not used to, especially if you can provide it with the type file. Another thing I use it for, actually, like I said, we got the ChatGPT team account. So I made a custom GPT just for our team that basically does consistent pull request descriptions. So I just basically built a template for that, gave it to the custom GPT, and so now we just basically put our changes in point form, put it into the GPT, and it gives us a consistent pull request description with testing plan, all that kind of. Sometimes you got to flesh it out, and sometimes you got to fix stuff up, but it does a pretty good job and saves time. I use it for debugging. I talked about this already. It saves a lot of time on deciphering error message. SQL queries is a big one for me as well. I got hired before I finished Get Coding. Like I talked about, I didn't touch much on database. The early part of my career, I did very little on database as well, because Derek is our database wizard and he does all of it. But lately I've started to do a bit more, and I found ChatGPT extremely helpful with this. It doesn't give me the perfect solution, but it does jumpstart me in the right direction for like basic query structure and explanation and all that stuff. And you guessed it, this saves me time as well. I mean, I use ChatGPT not even just in work. Like I talked about before, I use it all the time in my day-to-day. Recipes is a big one. I'll never use those shitty recipe websites on the internet ever again. Recently, I had pork chops taken out for supper, and I wanted some kind of exotic meal. So I told ChatGPT to give me an exotic meal with pork chops. It gave me a Moroccan pork chop recipe. It sounded really good. So I said, okay, I'll try that. Then I told it to give me a rice recipe that would pair nice with it. It gave me a curry fried rice. It was delicious. Yeah, so I use it all the time for recipes. I generate stories for my kids at bedtime with it. I generate images for slideshow presentations. Not these ones, though. I drew all these, I promise. I honestly don't think about this all that much. I just really enjoy using ChatGPT, but obviously AI is having an impact on the tech industry. I'm going to open this up to general conversation very soon for this part in particular or anything. But some things that immediately come to mind for me are increased productivity, accelerated baseline knowledge, and AI-driven features. I touched on this probably 100 times in the presentation, but it saves me so much time on everything I do, from documentation to debugging, TypeScript, learning new libraries, SQL, everything. It saves me so much time. It's literally pushed my productivity up to 11 because I don't spend time going to figure these things out. It's all in one spot. And even editing social media posts. I do the networking events for Net Benefit, my Get Gaming events. I'm not a professional writer by any means, but it can very quickly give you a nice social media post when you give it some context. Accelerated baseline knowledge, as I've touched on. Well, it's not at the point where it's going to build a full app on a prompt. Not yet, anyway. But it's definitely at the point where it can rapidly grow your baseline skills if you use it properly. I definitely 100% believe I'm further ahead of my career today, thanks in large part to ChatGPT. Like I said before, I'm confident in my abilities to code, but I've just learned so much quicker with this tool. This comes back to productivity as well. It's just being able to find answers through documentation quickly. You're spending a lot less time doing that, and you're actually spending a lot more time learning. And then AI-driven features, you're starting to see it everywhere. I mean, support bots. And for a while, you could literally go on Chevrolet's website, open up their support bot, and ask it coding questions. They literally had ChatGPT built right into their support bot. You can't do that anymore, but you could. I mean, it's baked in pretty much everything Microsoft has now. There's small companies out there whose entire business model revolves around AI models like ChatGPT. We're starting to explore building AI into our product at Net Benefit. We put together a team to explore it, and I'm pumped to be a part of that team. That's my quick take on the industry, impact on the industry. And now I'll just open it up to general discussion. Really, I'm curious how you guys see it impacting the industry. So any QA, any questions for me, ask away, but just general conversation. Just talk away.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew, very much. Really enjoyed that. So yeah, it's open for conversation. Also use the chat in Zoom to ask your questions if you like. I'm gonna stop recording now, so we have a more casual conversation if you like.